Welcome to Motivated to Lead podcast, helping you become a better leader. I'm your host, Mark Klingsheim. Hi, everyone. Thanks again for joining us for our podcast this week. My name is Mark Klingsheim with SEMA Partners. Each week, we interview leaders and they share lessons learned from their careers. Our goal is to help you become a better leader. This week, we're happy to have join us Nathan King. Nathan has worked with leadership teams, helping them achieve powerful execution and growth. And he has been involved in both PE-backed companies as well as publicly traded companies. And he focuses in his consulting practice on guiding organizational transformations and helping leaders build high-performing teams through executive coaching and facilitating leadership team development. He's got some great insights that he's going to share with us today. Looking forward to today's conversation with Nathan. Appreciate you taking time out of your week to chat.
Well, Mark, thank you for having me on your show. I'm looking forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, for our audience, can you give us just a little bit of your background, a little bit of your career story?
Sure. I'm a consultant and executive coach, and I have been working largely in healthcare firms for close to 25 years. And I landed as a consultant and executive coach after leading a business unit for a healthcare services firm, where I realized that what I'm most passionate about is helping organizations transform, and in particular, helping executives figure out how to get clear on what they're trying to accomplish and what they really want with their teams, and helping those executives then create the structures and processes to go out and achieve it. So that's what's led me into a recent chapter that started 2 years ago.
Great. So I like to ask this question to most every guest. If you were able to spin back time and talk to a 22-year-old Nathan and give him some advice, knowing what you know now, what would you tell him?
Oh, that's a great question. When I was 22, I was an English teacher in Venezuela. And that's before it was a failed state. And as I was sitting there trying to figure out what am I going to do the rest of my life, I had this image that making money was a very important, noble pursuit, and shaping your vocation to match wealth acquisition was the right way to go. And if I were to counsel that guy, I would counsel him not to pursue that approach, that nothing is wrong with wealth, and wealth is a great tool. But focusing on the questions that you're most passionate about, most interested in, will lead you to opportunities and interesting areas where you can figure out ways to add value in ways that harness your strengths and give you a lot of meaning. And so that would be the advice. It would be de-emphasize a focus on wealth creation and emphasize pursuing interesting questions that will help solve problems for others.
So as you look back in your career where you were called upon to lead your first team, what do you wish you would have known sooner about leadership?
Yeah, that's a great one as well. Maybe the place to start is, well, what does leadership even mean? And I think that answer can vary depending on who you're talking to. And when I think about leadership, it's about making sure that there's real clarity about what it is that we're trying to accomplish, and then making sure that the relationships are in place for the people who have stake in what we're trying to accomplish. So in other words, if you're a middle manager, your senior leaders are people who have a stake in what's to be accomplished, and making sure that you have strong alignment and strong relationships with them is the most important thing, because that's going to mean that you're going to have trust and they're going to be willing to work with you. And similarly, the people who are subordinate to you also need to have the same sort of clarity and strong relationships. So there's often thoughts about leadership being visionary, leadership being bold and courageous, and all of those things are true. But I think at its essence, Leadership is really about having the relational equity with people where you can create a sense of clarity about what we're trying to accomplish together.
We had connected a few days ago and talked a little bit about some of the topics that you enjoy talking about. You mentioned the whole idea of starting with a blank page. Kind of how do you, as a leader, sometimes you come into an environment and you're really not sure what to do. You've got you probably a lot of things you could do, but you've got to set the direction. But talk a little bit about that. And
One of the biggest challenges all of us face is the what I like to call the blank page problem, which is you have a kind of a high level idea what you're wanting to go towards, but how do you figure it out? What are the first steps that you take? What are the specific actions that will lead you down the path? It can often be overwhelming. And there's a great illustration from Winston Churchill when before World War II, he lost his position in the UK government, and he was essentially put out to pasture. And as far as he could see, his career was over. And he took up painting to reduce stress. And he wrote an essay about his journey into painting. And one of his early lessons was he was sitting there outside, and he had a blank canvas, and he couldn't figure out what to do with that canvas, what to put on that canvas. And so he very tentatively dipped his brush into blue, and he put a little small dot on there. And right as he did that, somebody came to him who he knew, who was a painter, and said, "Give me that brush, the big one." And he described in his very Churchillian manner how that she scooped out a big blob of paint and then started massacring the blank canvas with painting. And his lesson from that was he was never tentative about painting ever since. He realized you just got to jump in. And I think that's the blank page problem. So if I sit down and I know I need to come up with a strategy for my business, or refine my strategy, or develop it in some way, but then an email pops up, what am I going to do? Am I going to spend time on this blank PowerPoint slide, or am I going to go reply to the email? And the stats are that the average person is checking their email, every 6 minutes. And can you really actually get anything meaningfully done in 5 minute snatches of time in between the time that you're checking email? But I suspect that it's much easier for us to react to what's coming at us than it is to actually take initiative and create something on that blank page. And so the lesson for me that I've picked up from all of this and my years of working in the workforce is that it's really important to start to think through, what can I put and how can I start, and know that what I put down isn't necessarily going to be the end result, but it's going to move me in the direction that's going to produce something that's going to be competitive, compelling, and help us get to the next level as a company. And conversely, to avoid putting myself in a situation where I'm just reacting because I'm not making the time and space for myself to apply something to that blank canvas, so to speak.
so with technology and everything that we have, as far as that can be distractions, and you get pulled in a lot of different directions, and you have meetings and things that you have to attend, and especially if you're a new leader, you're not calling the shots as far as for all the things that you're a part of. But what are some practical things that you think a new leader could do, again, to be more focused in their role and being able to get things done that are meaningful versus just busy work?
Yeah, great question. The first thing I would recommend to a new leader is block time in your calendar, and then honor that time, as is the quick follow up. If you put 8 to 9 a.m. as a block time on a particular day, maybe you can't do that every day. Probably you can't do that every day. But if you can pick a day or two a week where you can block that time, where people cannot book time with you, and then you honor it when you actually sit down at 8 in the morning and you tend to what you've blocked it for. And then you make that time about a priority initiative. What's the most important thing that I can get done that moves the business forward, should be the focus of what that time looks like. So that would be step one. That's an administrative step, but perhaps a more complex or nuanced step is how do you get clarity about where you can be most value added? And for that, for a new leader in particular, what I recommend is that they seek out the counsel of the people who are around them and have been in the context of the company for a longer period of time. Because the best ideas in the world are usually already known by the people who are there. They're either too constrained by time to take action on them, or they're not able to. They don't have the right authority to take action on them, or they just haven't thought through what those will be. And then when someone asks them, they sort of start to surface. And so you collect those and you have 5, 6 interviews, so to speak, with people who are in the seats in the business that are people who are of influence and are responsible for making action happen. You start to synthesize a set of real high priorities that you can then incorporate into your own work. I think the answers are generally in the minds of people that we work with of what we need to focus on. And that's a huge opportunity for new leaders is to understand them. And then you build a lot of credibility by following up on them. Mark, if you tell me that our challenge is that we're not, um, consistently marketing through our LinkedIn channel enough, and then I take from that conversation, um, I take that to heart and I create several LinkedIn posts for the company that can be then published. Then you're going to see that I'm here to help you out, and I'm here to make sure that the company is successful and that I'm reliable and dependable, and that's going to increase the trust that you have in me to perhaps want to work with me on more important, higher stakes initiatives down the line.
As a part of managing people, you're getting work done through others and helping them grow and develop. Talk a little bit about kind of how to give developmental feedback. I think that's one of the, I remember the first time that I had a team that I managed, and I had to sit down and give them kind of a review, that annual review that, and you're trying to do your best as far as to help them as far as grow, but talk a little bit about that, some thoughts around that.
Yeah, I think the best way to lay the groundwork for giving developmental feedback is to be vulnerable yourself. So if you want to give someone feedback to help them develop, you're going to be speaking to gaps that you've seen in their behavior. You're going to be speaking to things that they've not done that they potentially could have done, and you'd like to see them make a change to do. And the question is, are you with them? They're going to have this question. Are you with them? Do you want them to succeed? Or are you a critic throwing stones? The easiest way for them to know that you are with them is if you're vulnerable. And so before ever giving any feedback, what I recommend is that uh, a manager show up in a way that describes, you know what, I didn't do this thing as well as I could have. When we were in the meeting together the other day talking about Project X, I misspoke and said something, and I could have handled that differently. If people hear you talk that way, they will start to think, oh, he's looking to grow. How do I grow better? And similarly, asking them for feedback. What could I do to be a better leader for you? How could I support you better? Maybe they have no answer or aren't willing to provide you an answer. Maybe they don't want to take the risk, at least at first, but you're sending them a signal that what you're here for is development and growth. So now that lets you set the standard. And then when you start giving feedback to people, they're going to know that you're coming from a good place. And so in that arena, I think it's really important that you're specific. Not that you say you talk too much in meetings, but to say, the other day we were in this meeting and I really wanted to hear from Jennifer, but you took a lot of airtime and we ran out of time. And it would be helpful if you could just keep that in mind next time. So now that person can think about the specific meeting. They can think about that situation. They know exactly what their behavior was, and they can start to think about how they would behave or respond in a different way. So those the first is you be vulnerable. The second is be specific, and then the third is be consistent. It would be a loss for a manager to wait a year to give feedback that would help somebody to grow. But that's often what happens. We're busy, it's messy, we don't want to do it. But making a point to meet every week or every other week with your direct reports and then sharing that information as you go is a really valuable process to them that keeps the development happening and keeps that conversation going.
What are some great questions a leader can ask? I found that, some of the best leaders I've worked with didn't have all the answers, but they asked great questions. What are some questions that you think should be
Yeah.
on a leader's mind as they're leading?
When I was a new leader, I thought I needed to have all the answers, like you're saying. I mean, it feels like you're speaking to my 27-year-old self when you say that. And one something happened once where somebody came in my office and they said, "Hey, I've got this problem. I'm not really sure what to do. What should I do?" And it was a real complicated situation, and I had no idea. And I was terrified that I was going to say, "I don't know," and this person would know that I wasn't qualified to be their leader because I didn't have all the answers. And so the way that I got around that was I said, "Well, what do you think we should do?" And this person said, "I think we should do whatever A, B, and C." And I thought it was brilliant. It was better than anything that I came up with. And my response was, that's great. I think you should do that. And that's, a somewhat flippant story, somewhat comedic in what that experience was. But I think there's a deeper lesson here, which is, you really want to position the person that's on your team to take as much responsibility as they can. And as a leader, the questions you ask can help them cultivate that self-sufficiency and that critical thinking. And it won't always result in they just take complete responsibility for it, but it may result in a elaboration between you and the person as you work through a particular situation. So when you're meeting with someone, it's much better to say, what are some of the things you think that are important right now? What should we work on? And if they bring a challenge to you, to ask them, what do you think some of our options are to do about that? When you start asking them the questions, you get their juices flowing, and they start to come up with their own solutions and their own ideas, which is ultimately what you want. So that's kind of how I think about that: is asking them, what do you think we should do, and what are the reasons you think that, and how would you go about prioritizing the ideas that you have?
Oh, that's great. What do you think one of the biggest challenges facing leaders today is?
The uncertainty. I mean, in this particular moment of April 2025, we have macroeconomic uncertainty. Recent change in a presidential administration has created some of that. So you do have policy driven uncertainty, but you always have, to some extent, you have policy driven uncertainty in various sectors of the economy. But the bigger source of uncertainty is the technological shift that we're experiencing right now. Um, you know, if you see articles about how do you best use AI from 6 months ago, they're completely obsolete compared to how to use the latest model that came out last week. This is the fastest pace of technological change I think any of us in the workforce have ever experienced. And so that creates should I be planning for 2 years from now based on the way technology sits today, or should I be planning for 2 months from now only? And dealing with that uncertainty is definitely the number one agenda item for every leader in our economy here in the U.S.
So, anything that you've learned recently that you're excited about, that the use of AI that you think is going to be helpful as far as for leaders as they're thinking about issues or problems that they're facing?
Well, I think the biggest piece is how it augments our capabilities. So I think of the tool Deep Research, which ChatGPT released a couple of months ago, that does empower people to do MBA level, maybe even PhD level research If you're, for instance, if you want to research a new offering that you've developed, maybe it's a new service offering, you can go in to use deep research to understand who are the main competitors in that space. How are each of those competitors positioning themselves? What is the market size for this? What are some of the potential um, messaging approaches that we can take? And you can put together a 5,000 page report in 15 minutes. Not 100% of it is going to be actionable, usable. It may raise other questions, but I find that to be a very powerful source of um, elaboration for leaders. Like, you can get that information, you can provide follow up information back to it, and then you can build out some plans based on the information that you've got, and it just accelerates a lot of the activity required to develop new business tests or fleshing out ideas altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. So, growing as a leader is important. And any books that you would put on a leader's read list that you think would be helpful as they're growing their leadership skills?
Maybe the book that I've read most frequently is The Effective Executive by Peter Drucker. He wrote that book in 1967, and I just continually revisit the ideas in that book. And they essentially boil down to, if you're going to be effective, you really need to understand where your time is going. You need to prioritize very carefully. In fact, he asserts that an effective leader only works on one thing at a time, and that's not how we operate. in, in most businesses, we don't think about one thing at a time. We think about 10 things at a time. And he makes a very compelling case about being clear about what we measure and how we use measurement and decision making together to understand the impact of our decisions. So that's the top recommendation I have. It's not a long read. It's not a dense, difficult read, and it's kind of timeless, given that it was written in 1967 and it's as applicable today as it ever was.
Any favorite quotes that you have that you refer to?
Yeah, there's uh, there's one that I do reference quite a bit, and it comes from I guess it's a poem by Wendell Berry. It's called Manifesto: The Mad Farmer Liberation Front, and in it he says, "Invest in the millennium, plant sequoias. Say that your main crop is the forest that you did not plant, that you will not live to harvest." And that's a I think that's an impactful way to look at the world, because we often think about, what am I going to do today that I'm going to harvest tomorrow,
Right.
that I'm going to live to benefit from? And that shifts the mind. If you're thinking about planting a forest and sequoias, then you're never going to see it. Your vision is way beyond your lifetime. And that's a reframe that I find continually helpful to come back to for my own career, my own life, to think intentionally.
So, outside of work, what do you like to do to recharge?
I have 15-year-old boys, and so spending time with them and my wife is probably the top for me. So we enjoy um, camping and hiking. The boys and I do, and we often will spend our free time traveling. We recently went to Mexico, and my boys are budding beach bums, and so we try to find a beach somewhere where we can kind of relax, play in the waves, maybe do some scuba diving or snorkeling.
Uh, Great. So, what parting advice would you give our listeners that are new and up and coming leaders?
You mentioned something earlier in our conversation about getting work done through others. And it's easy to lose sight of the fact that we're ultimately, as leaders, we're getting work done through others. We tend to focus on, we're trying to solve a problem, we're trying to get to a funding event or an exit event, and um, thinking about, how can I equip my team to accomplish uh, bigger things than any of us is capable of doing independently. that's really the challenge that I would leave everybody with, thinking about how do you plant sequoias with your team.
Well, Nathan, it's been a lot of fun talking with you, and wish you success in all your ventures. How would somebody learn more about your work and what you do?
The easiest place is to find me on LinkedIn. You can just search for my name, Nathan King, there, and then I'm also on my website would be an easy place to connect with me as well, which is kingstrategicaction.com.
Thank you for listening to the Motivated to Lead podcast. Please subscribe on iTunes. You can also see a video version of this interview at motivatedtolead.com. This podcast is brought to you by SEMA Partners, helping you find your next great leader.